Titans, Bears, week 1 is here. We finally made it to football. What are the biggest question marks about this Titans roster still as we head into week 1? What's the health status of the team, and what are the matchups to watch? We're going to dive into it now. This is the week 1 preview on the Music City Audible. Let's get into it. Oh, welcome, Justin, to another episode, the most exciting episode of the last 6 months or so of the Music City Audible podcast presented by Broadway Sports Media in partnership with 440 Sports. I'm Justin Graver. With me, as always, Justin Melo. And today, yes, we are previewing Titans at Bears, week 1, actual football. How you feeling?
I'm feeling really good. I'm so excited that we finally made it here. I couldn't be more pumped up for this matchup. You know, I've got so many questions going into it. I'm excited to get those answers. I think more so this season than any other that I can remember in recent memory, at least. I don't know what to expect. I think there's a bit of a layer of mystery surrounding this team. It's, you know, the coaching change obviously has a lot to do with that. The start personnel changes has a lot to do with that. I don't know what's going to happen, and that to me adds a big time layer of excitement.
Yeah, same. I mean, there's so many questions that we'll finally get answers to during this game, like some of the, what's the offense really going to look like? What's the workload split of the running backs really going to look like? But there's some things that I want to start this by looking at sort of big picture, looking at the Titans season and what to expect from this team, because Brian Callahan went on the OTP, the official Titans podcast, earlier this week. And if you listen to Blaine and Zach on 104.5 The Zone, on Tuesday, they went in depth, and Zach played a bunch of clips from the pod, but it was funny because I had listened to the pod with Brian Callahan, and then the next thing that popped up for me on YouTube was the 104.5 Blaine and Zach, and I hadn't got a chance to check out Zach on the radio yet, obviously very familiar with him as a podcaster, and tuned in. And first of all, if Zach's listening to this, he is excellent. This is a guy who was just a guy like us who started a podcast, and now he is a professional radio mid-afternoon drive time host, and he's killing. I mean, he was really, I'm super impressed with Zach. But Zach kind of stole my thunder a little bit, because I was planning to come on this podcast today, play some clips from Brian Callahan on the OTP and break it down, but Zach already handled that. So if you missed it, go check out 104.5 The Zone's YouTube channel. You can find Blaine and Zach breaking it down. But I do want to talk about a few things from this OTP episode, because as I've harped on many times since Brian Callahan was hired, Callie is a guy who is going to tell you straight up what he thinks, what he's going to do. He wants to explain and educate the fans and the people who cover the team on what the team looks like. And I just love the honesty. But there were a few things that really stood out to me in this interview, and I want to touch on them. The first is the edge rotation. So he was directly asked, who's going to be, helping out Harold Landry and Arden Key when they need a breather? Who are going to be the first guys off the bench? And he said Jalen Harrell will play, Caleb Murphy will play. We'll see where Ali's at, Ali Gay. We'll see if he can get up and get some reps, but they want to have 5 edge guys active. They have 5 on the roster, with Ali Gay being the last one, who was just added after, roster cutdown day. So he's still getting into the system and everything. But it was really interesting to me when he said that these 2 guys specifically, in Jalen Harrell and Caleb Murphy, will play. And Jalen Harrell was the first name he mentioned. And he went on to say, Arden and Harold can't play every snap. And we've, covered this team since the Mike Vrabel days, when Harold Landry, but pre-ACL, was playing 95% of defensive snaps. And we've been saying for years, to keep these guys fresh, you got to have a rotation on the defensive line, so that when it's the fourth quarter and you need a big, strong pass rush, they're not out of breath. So I'm interested to see just how much Jalen Harrell and Caleb Murphy will play. It's interesting that those guys who were back end of the roster, maybe not going to make the team in Caleb Murphy's case, are going to get some significant snaps in this game. You think they regret not having Rashad Weaver? Obviously, they think these other guys are better, or they would have kept Weaver on the roster. I'm really curious to see how this edge rotation is going to shake out in week 1, especially going against a rookie quarterback with a defensive coordinator that we expect to blitz the hell out of the other team.
I can't believe it's the first thing you want to talk about, to be honest, but I'll entertain you. Yes, you talk about, talking about for years, we want to see, well, you got to be good behind those guys to rest those guys. And I don't know that they're good enough to rest them with regularity.
Think they
right?
are. I
don't want to see a lot of Caleb Murphy in this game. That doesn't
Right.
excite me, thinking that I'm going to see a lot of Caleb Murphy in this game. Jalen Harrell, I'm very intrigued by. I think he looks the part. He's big, he's strong, he's physical, he's quick off the edge. So I'm very excited about what he could potentially add. But no, you're not going to excite me by saying Caleb Murphy and Ali Gay. No, that's bad news if those guys are playing a lot of reps in this game. So I've entertained you. Let's get to what really matters now. Are you got another clip from the OTP you'd like to discuss?
I had one other interesting thing that Callahan said, which was about the running game. And then I think Easton Freeze at Zach's suggestion asked Callie about this on Wednesday to get even more info on it. But one of the things he said was, we don't measure our running success by how many rush attempts we have or how many yards per carry we average. He said, if you're piling up rush attempts, that's usually because you're winning late in the game and you're trying to drain out the clock, which is like common sense to most football nerds these days. It's that like rushing carries does not lead to wins. Winning leads to more carries. And It's just very refreshing to hear Brian Callahan come out and say that. But he said it's more about, for us, our success rate. He went deep into EPA per play. Are we having a positive EPA? Like, this head coach is using Twitter nerd football breakdown terms. I mean, EPA has become a lot more common over the last few years, but like, I don't think Mike Vrabel was relying on EPA to tell him if his running game was successful or not, right? Maybe he was, but we know the analytics department under Mike Vrabel was not very well staffed. And went on to talk about, like, are we creating explosives in the run game? It's not necessarily about how many carries we're creating, but are we being efficient with them, and are we creating explosive plays? So there was a little bit of a hoopla made on Twitter, Titans Twitter, earlier this week when Brian Callahan said, we're going to run the ball. We need to be a good running team, in a press conference earlier this week where everyone was like, oh, what the heck? I thought we finally hired a guy who was bringing in a modern offense. But I think what he meant by that was, like, we need to be effective when we choose to run, but I don't think we're going to see a run heavy offense here. So it just excites me even more. It's everything that I thought we were going to get from Brian Callahan, but hearing him sort of confirm that they want to, run when the defense is not expecting it and pick up 5-6 yards a carry versus 2nd and 9. We're going to run the ball into the back of our center and hope we can ground out 2 to 3 yards. I love the approach from Brian Callahan. I just thought that was really interesting.
I'll tell you where I'm at with that right now. I have no doubt that this is going to be a pass-happy team, a pass-happy offense, 11 personnel. They've got the receivers for it. I wonder if that's going to be the case in week one. I think, we talk about week one being a liar all the time. That's been proven by the Titans in their recent history almost more than any other team in the league, right? Like, you can go back the last few years, right? Like Ken Whisenhunt's teams, you're going way back. We're really good in week one, typically, right? Awful the other 16 weeks of the regular season. Yeah. Mike Vrabel's teams, I mean, never the 7-hour loss against the Dolphins, getting blown out by the Cardinals. Both of those seasons ended up being pretty decent, pretty damn good, especially the Cardinals one. Ended up being a really good season, right? Or remember there was one where they blew out the Browns and then they barely did anything the next 4 or 5 weeks, and that's what led to the Tannehill change.
Benched Mariota that season after he opened up with like a 43-point
Week one's a liar. Week one's a liar. Very true for the Titans. This is a first-year staff, a lot of new players. Every year, I think teams are less and less prepared to play in week one. That's not a knock on coaches, players, nothing. They're doing less and less, right? Camp, preseason, it's getting less physical. That makes getting ready for week one harder. And I think one of the better ways to take the sting out of that is to run the football effectively, right? That's old school football. It's basic concepts. So, that's one of the things I'm watching. How run heavy are they in week one? They might be run heavier than you're expecting them to be, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be a run heavy team. I just think, and you're on the road, right? In an atmosphere, by the way, that's going to be lit because this franchise is so excited for Caleb Williams, as they should be. That crowd is going to be ruckus on Sunday. One of the better ways to take the sting out of that is to run the ball effectively, win the time of possession battle. I don't know I don't know what they're going to do. I've already said it. That's why I'm so excited for this game. But that's one of the things that I've got an inkling about. I wonder if they're going to run the ball a bit more than we expect them to.
It's going to be interesting. There's one other thing Brian Callahan said that was very intriguing, and I'm going to come back to that in a second, because before we get too deep, let's remind everyone who's listening that we appreciate you for listening. But if you're watching on YouTube, we appreciate you even more. So head over to the YouTube channel, make sure you're subscribed to the Music City Audible, give this video a like, thumbs up, and turn on channel alerts so you get a notification every time we drop a new video. Drop a comment below. What are you looking forward to most in this game? What's your score prediction? We'll come to ours at the end of this video, of this podcast. But if you're watching on YouTube, let us know in the comments below who's winning this game, Titans or Bears. And also, this episode is brought to you by Sinkers Beverages in East Nashville. More on Sinkers Beverages in a bit, Justin, with a new segment called I'll Drink to That. It's going to be recurring every episode throughout the fall here. So we're going to be drinking, we're going to crack some brews here courtesy of Sinkers Beverages in just a little bit. The last thing that Brian Callahan said that had me very intrigued was he was asked, what is Will Levis's biggest challenge going to be in this game? And he didn't really answer that question, but he did say that he answered it with a non-answer. But what he said was really interesting. He said the first couple weeks of the season are all about not making mistakes and protecting the football, because we're all still trying to figure out what our offense is going to look like, what our most successful plays are going to be. It's not going to be about airing it out, bombing it down the field, and looking for, big 75-yard touchdowns. It's going to be take what the defense gives you, manage the game, run the system, and most of all, protect the football. He said the first, 2-3 weeks of the season, the teams that are turning the ball over more are usually losing. And that's true of basically every football game in general. Is a team that turns the ball over more typically tends to lose. But it's especially true in the early weeks of the season where you're just trying to figure out what your team's going to be and what your identity is for that year. So I think this leads me to a question for you, Justin. This is a big season-long question prediction that's going to launch us more specifically into this Bears-Titans preview. How many weeks before the Titans, who have not scored over 30 points since that Dolphins game in the 2022 season, how many weeks until the Titans under Brian Callahan crack 30 points?
I think it's going to be a little bit. They've got some tough matchups, right? Like week 2 is the Jets. They got a great defense. The Dolphins are early too, right? Like week 3 or 4.
Week 4.
It might not be till week 5 or 6. I think it's going to be pretty close to the midway mark. I don't think they're scoring 30 throughout this early a tough stretch that they've got.
I'm going to say week 4 at Miami Dolphins or week 5 at home against the Colts. One of those two games, they're cracking 30, and that's when it happens. But a lot of Titans fans are like, we finally got a offensive coordinator, head coach, offensive-minded head coach. The offense is going to be fixed. We're coming out week 1, and we're beating the Bears 38-13. There's Titans fans who think that. Don't get me wrong.
Bears feel the same way.
And the Bears feel the same way. Do you see the Bears fan who posted earlier in the week that the Titans secondary gave up the most receptions over expected or some nonsense stat talking about the Titans secondary like they didn't overhaul the entire unit and bring in a new coaching staff? But yeah, we're all stuck in our sort of perceptions of 2023 until we see football in 2024. So brand new team. I do think it is going to take them a few weeks to hit 30 points, though. And I think what Brian Callahan said in that answer about just managing the game and protecting the football is kind of key in that, because that's the emphasis to Will Levis is not going to be we need to score a 60-yard touchdown on every drive. It's going to be we need to control the clock. We need to control possession. We need to get points on every drive. And if that means we settle for a field goal, then so be it. But I feel like this is going to be a lower scoring game than people want or think. So with that, let's dive into it. There are some intriguing matchups that I think are going to decide this game. And we're going to have a guest on in a little bit. Jacob Infante of the Windy City Gridiron, the SB Nation Bears site, is going to come on and give us his thoughts on the Bears perspective. So we're going to get to that after we talk about our thoughts from our perspective. But one of the biggest matchups I think in this game is going to be the Titans' rebuilt offensive line, headed up by Bill Callahan, going up against this Bears defensive line that's a little bit underrated, a little deeper than you think, but specifically with a guy like Montez Sweat, who, if he's rushing against J.C. Latham, that's a trial by fire for the rookie here. And if he's up against Nicholas Petit-Frere, I don't know who I feel better about blocking Montez Sweat one-on-one or who the chip help is going to go to. And this is going to be interesting to see because on the one hand, you're very high on the rookie, but he's a rookie and it's his first game action that's not preseason. On the other side, Nicholas Petit-Frere struggled a lot, but he won the right tackle job pretty convincingly. How good do you feel about him in this kind of matchup? What are your thoughts on Titans offensive line taking on what was a very, very good Bears defense for the second half of last season?
Well, I got an easy answer for you, and I hope the Titans feel the same way. the chip help goes to whatever side Montez Sweat is on, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think it's that simple because I don't care what side it's on. The other tackle for the Titans has to be able to handle what's going to be a very, very average edge rusher opposite Montez Sweat. They are not deep at that position. You're talking about Darrell Taylor, who they just traded for a week ago, who was going to get cut maybe, or the week before.
Former Titan DeMarcus Walker's on the other side of the line.
DeMarcus Walker's there as well. But again, DeMarcus Walker's a guy they gave, big-ish money to. He had 3 sacks last year. They're paying DeMarcus Walker the same the Titans are paying Arden Key, by the way. So you're the same contract, I think. DeMarcus Walker had like 3 sacks. He is not an elite pass rusher. Okay, he got paid into that deal because he benefited from having Jeffrey Simmons and Bud Dupree, I think, was here, and Dina Quattree. Like, he had 7 sacks with the Titans. He had 3 with the Bears. The other tackle for the Titans has to be able to handle DeMarcus Walker, Darrell Taylor, or 5th-round rookie Austin Booker. Whichever one it is, you got to handle him, and the chip help goes to who's facing the Pro Bowl rusher and Montez Sweat. I'm in see it to believe it with this Bears D-line. You called it underrated. I don't know. Like, I don't like what they have there. And they're young and inexperienced inside, right? They got Andrew Billings, who's essentially a run stopper, and that's it. And then they've got Jervon Dexter, who was, sink or swim as a rookie. They're expecting him to take a step as a sophomore, but we've got to see it, right? Like, there were reps last year on tape where he was completely lost. I think he's going to be a very good player. Is he ready to be that in week 1? That's all I'm asking. So I think the Titans O-line, this is a pretty decent matchup, right? Going into week 1, especially for a new look unit who's finding it. It's Montez Sweat, and honestly, it might be just a bunch of guys.
Yeah, I think Austin Booker is a rookie to watch for this entire season. 2.5 sacks in the preseason. Yep. Granted, preseason, not against starting units most of the time, but a guy that I liked coming out of Kansas who fell to the 5th round and the Bears snatched him up. I think he could play some more snaps than maybe you'd expect from a 5th-round rookie. You
know what I'm saying, though, right? Like, if you can't handle Austin Booker in week 1, what are the Jets? If they week 2, they're throwing Hassan Reddick if he signs, and Jermaine John. Every other team they're going to face has a lot better edge rushers than what the Bears got for the most part.
Yeah. I agree. So let's move on to another matchup that very much intrigues me here, and sticking with the offensive side of the ball before we flip it over. These receivers that the Titans have are going up against one of the best secondaries, I think, on paper. One that definitely rivals the Titans. We'll talk about more about this when we get to Jacob in a bit. But Jalen Johnson signs for a huge contract this offseason. He was an all-pro corner last year, one of the best corners in the league. Tyreek Stevenson is a guy that came on really strong. Kyler Gordon, a very good nickelback. Jaquan Brisker is a very good safety, if not a great safety. And then Kevin Byard, of course, Titans fans know, in the later stages of his career, wasn't really the most effective player last year for the Titans or the Eagles. Now signs a big deal in Chicago to be their lead safety leader, that defense kind of guy. Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, by the way, practice update. DeAndre Hopkins practiced on Wednesday. He's back. He was a limited participant, but back on the field. So he is expected to be full go for week 1. That's great news for this receiving core. But with this new look receiving core, Hopkins, Ridley, and Boyd matching up against Jalen Johnson, Tyreek Stevenson, and Kyler Gordon, with the safeties obviously mixed in, what are you expecting to see? Who's going to be Will Levis's go-to guy in this matchup? Is Jalen Johnson going to erase one of these guys in the passing game? What are you expecting here?
I'll be honest, it might sound a little negative, but I wouldn't be stunned if Jalen Johnson does a pretty decent job erasing DeAndre Hopkins, right? Like, he's a really, really good cornerback. I almost expect him to follow him, right? Like, I think Johnson and Hopkins is the matchup. And Hopkins looked great at practice. Limited participant is great news. He should be full go. But, he's still got to knock the rust off a little. And Johnson's one of the best corners in the league. So I think that's a matchup that's really interesting for both sides. If I'm the Titans, the one that I hope I could have some more success with is the other two. It's Calvin Ridley against Tyreek Stevenson. I thought Stevenson was pretty good last year, very good for a rookie.
Yeah.
But there were some games where he gave up some stuff, and you got to like Calvin Ridley going up against him. And then Tyler Boyd as well, being the savvy veteran. Gordon's been around long enough. He's not that young or inexperienced anymore. But I think you like what Boyd gives you in the slot versus the nickel. That's a matchup you're going to get every single time, both of them are on the field. So really intriguing battles between the Titans receivers and the Bears corners. And I'd flip over to the other side and say it's the exact same thing with the Bears receivers and the Titans corners.
Yeah, I agree. And if you want to go ahead and move over to the other side of the ball, I did want to talk quickly about the running backs, Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears here. We talked about the running game as itself, but I'm also interested to see how much these guys are used in the passing game, because part of this, manage the game, take what the defense gives you, don't turn it over, is going to involve a lot of checkdowns to these running backs. And we saw it already in the preseason. We've been hearing about it all through training camp. Brian Callahan has harped on it. Like, get the ball to these playmakers and let them go. Will Levis has talked about how he trusts these guys to pick up yards after the catch. I'm very intrigued to see how many targets they get in the passing game, especially when you're going up against such a talented secondary, that there will be many plays in this game where Will Levis drops back and looks at his first read, and he's not open because Jalen Johnson and Tyreek Stevenson have him plastered, and he's either going to come off that read to his check down really quickly because it's kind of been drilled into his head that it's like, it's okay to get to your check down as your second or third read and not as your fourth or fifth read. I think it's going to happen quite a bit where we see these little dump offs to Pollard and Spears. So that's just one element of the game that I'm going to be watching closely. I don't think it's going to be as big a part of the offense by week 10, week 12. Like, I think we're going to have a better connection. We're going to see a better connection between Levis and the receivers on the outside. But at the beginning of the year, I think these two backs are going to feast in the passing game.
Well, it's exactly what we talked about earlier to a degree, right? Like playing things safe, taking what the defense gives you. I do think Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears are going to be a big part of this passing game. And there should be a lot of opportunity to have success by getting them the ball in space. So,
right.
And that's a big key for Will Levis. I mean, we've gone this long without talking about him, and I'm just going to throw this in there because it makes sense. One of the biggest factors for Will Levis's success, not only this year, this game, but moving forward in general, not to get too long-winded on you, but it's going to be how improved he is, or, the area that he has to improve in is to read the game, a bit quicker, a bit more efficiently, and get to those second and third reads quicker than he did last year and get the ball to his check down, right? Again, we talk about a lot about bringing that ADOT down from where it was last year, a league leading number. So part of that is going to be getting the ball to these backs. And in order to do that effectively, he's got to spot them quicker than he has in the past. So that's a huge area of emphasis, I think, for Will Levis going into this game, going into this season, and call me crazy, but for his entire career, right? Like, I think it's going to be a big part of determining whether he's a successful quarterback or not. It's how quickly he reads and how quickly he gets it to the check down.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's flip over to the defense here. I have more coming on Will Levis when we get to I'll drink to that. But before we get there, let's do quick matchups to watch. Titans defense against the Bears offense. Bears made some big-time acquisitions, similar to what the Titans did this offseason, bringing in a lot of talent across the board. Obviously, drafting Caleb Williams with the first overall pick is the most notable move and the headline grabber. They bring in running back DeAndre Swift, who had a pretty good year with the Eagles. They brought DJ Moore in already, and now they add to that by signing Keenan Allen, drafting Rome Odunze in the first round with the 9th overall pick, one of my favorite players in this draft. Cole Kmet is obviously still there, but they signed Gerald Everett as well. This offense has gotten a makeover in a very similar fashion to the way the Titans offense has gotten a makeover. So I think the key matchup for me, at least to start with here, and we're going to get to multiple, but it's the cornerbacks against these wide receivers. L'Jarius Sneed, Chido Awuzie, who's back at practice, by the way. L'Jarius Sneed practicing all this week, so that whole secondary is practicing together. Everyone except Jamal Adams, who's the only player on the Titans roster who did not participate in Wednesday's practice, dealing with a hip injury, was working off on a side field. Beat reporters who talked to people there said that he feels like he's getting back and should be ready to go for week 1, but definitely not unconcerning that he's not practicing on the first Wednesday practice. It's a little weird, but we'll see what happens with Jamal Adams. He's not going to be a starter every down player. He's going to be a specific role type of guy, so I'm not overly concerned about, even if Jamal Adams didn't play, I wouldn't be super concerned because I don't really know what his role is even going to be, but that's something definitely to know. But anyway, you got L'Jarius Sneed, Chido Awuzie, Roger McCreary matching up with these three great receivers, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze. The most intriguing part of this matchup to me is L'Jarius Sneed going to shadow DJ Moore? Because the Chiefs and the Bears played, last time they played, Sneed did shadow Moore. He allowed 1 catch on 5 targets in his coverage against DJ Moore. I think that he has the confidence that, like, I've shut this guy down before. I would like to see him travel with DJ Moore, but I'm curious to see how Denard Wilson is going to handle the cornerback deployment this year.
I hope he does, and I think he will, because I think that's why they brought him here, right? Like, he's a known traveler, right? Like, he did it all the time with the Chiefs against the best receivers in the NFL, and he had a lot of success doing it. Like, why? You trade for him, you give him the big contract, Like, you brought him in to erase number one receivers. Like, and it wouldn't have happened under Mike Vrabel. And I always liked Vrabel, but they didn't really have corners that were capable of traveling. But I don't know that Vrabel was a big fan of having the whole travel element go on there with the corners. I want to see L'Jarius Sneed travel with DJ Moore. He's by far their best, most dynamic receiver, and Sneed is by far your best, most dynamic corner. So, and Denard Wilson being a former DB, I mean, you got to know why you brought this guy in, and you got to know how to properly use him. So I hope he travels with them, and I'm expecting that he will.
Yeah, and what's interesting to me about this is I was just watching some Bears games from last year the other day, just prepping for the season and whatnot, and I stumbled upon their week 17 matchup with Atlanta, where DJ Moore, playing in a very heavy snowstorm, goes for 9 catches, 159 yards, and a touchdown. Again, like, there's swirling white in the screen, the
with
replay angles, the cameras on the replay angles are blotted with snow. And yes, Justin Fields was playing quarterback. He played really well in that game, by the way. The Bears blew them out 30-something to teens. Granted, this was Atlanta Falcons. Like, at the end of the year, they had given up on the season, but that's not the point. The point is, DJ Moore was matched up primarily with AJ Terrell in this game. AJ Terrell was like one of the very few handful of corners who were more physical, according to PFF's new physicality metric, which measures how often a cornerback gets his hands on the opposing wide receiver. AJ Terrell was the top of the league at that stat, 40% physicality rate. He plays a very similar style to L'Jarius Sneed. So my point with this whole, DJ Moore had a great game against AJ Terrell. Didn't have a very good game against Sneed. Again, 1 catch on 5 targets for 4 yards. But DJ Moore has had success against this style of corner, this physicality of corner. So that's one matchup that I'm definitely a little scared of. And another one is, I'm assuming it's going to be Roger McCreary pretty much solely focused on stopping Keenan Allen, because he's a slot guy. Roger McCreary is your slot cornerback. Keenan Allen is one of the most crafty route runners in the league. He's been very good for a very long time. That matchup scares me a little bit. I think we could see Keenan Allen sort of eaten up over the middle. I know Roger McCreary is a very good nickel corner, and we're very high on what he can be. But this is a pretty huge test for him right out of the gate.
Yeah, I think if I'm the Bears, I'm probably identifying that one as one of, if not my most advantageous matchup, right? Like, I mean, Keenan Allen's like 8-time Pro Bowl, like something stupid, right? Like, you're talking about a guy, and he was still outstanding last year for the Chargers in his old age, if you will. So certainly if you're the Bears, you got to feel good about that matchup of Keenan Allen against Roger McCreary.
Any other matchups, a defense versus offense you're looking at? We've pretty much focused solely on the corner wide receivers here, so I assume you're going to get to the D-line.
I want to get to that one, but I'll throw you one final one before we get to that. It's we've talked a little throughout this offseason about the Titans' ability to defend the middle of the field, right? That's an area I'll be watching closely, because we know, it's never been Kenneth Murray's strong suit. It wasn't Ernest Jones's strong suit with the Rams per se. And it's certainly not Jack Gibbons' strong suit when he's in the game either. And then Jamal Adams, you got the hip injury, hasn't been his strong suit. Do the Bears, are they smart enough to try to exploit that early? Do they look out Cole Kmet, a very good tight end? They bring in Gerald Everett as the tight end too, who's essentially a pass catcher and a pass catcher only, not an inline guy. So they could have some opportunities. Roshan Johnson, DeAndre Swift's caught a lot of balls throughout his career. Certainly there may be some opportunities for the Bears to test the Titans' ability to cover and defend the middle of the field. And that's an area I don't have a ton of confidence in this defense. And it's one I'll be watching closely, because I can't wait to see what it looks like.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that's a good shout. And that sort of extends to, what does the run defense look like? Because we saw mixed results in the preseason. Granted, we didn't see the starting 11 defense take the field for a single snap during the preseason, but I'm definitely curious to see how this run defense performs with some linebackers like Kenneth Murray, who have struggled at times in their career, but have been reportedly playing really well and really fast in this system. And then Brian Callahan said Ernest Jones is not going to start in this game because he's still getting up to speed with the defense. So we're going to see Jack Gibbons take the field first, but Ernest Jones will play some packages in this game. So how does the run defense look? And then can they pressure Caleb Williams? And how do they try to pressure Caleb Williams? This is the biggest mystery to me. Is Denard Wilson going to take from the Todd Bowles, Greg Williams tree, where it's like, we're sending pressure every passing down, but you don't know where it's coming from. It could come from the secondary, it could come from the linebackers, it could come from anywhere on the field. Or is he going to be more in the Mike McDonald vein, which is we're going to simulate pressure on every down. We're going to load the line of scrimmage with 6 or 7 guys, and then 3 of them are going to drop into coverage. And you don't know who's dropping and which side they're dropping from. We're going to overload one side of the line and then rush from the opposite side or rush from that side. Like, I'm very curious to see what kind of blitz packages and pressure packages are unveiled by Denard Wilson in this game because, and maybe we'll be wrong, but I don't think the Titans are a team that's going to generate a lot of pressure by beating one-on-one matchups. Like Harold Landry against whoever, and in this game is going to be the guy they drafted last year, probably Darnell Wright out of Tennessee at right tackle, or maybe he'll be matched up on the other side against Braxton Jones a bit too. But it's like, is Harold Landry going to beat him one-on-one with a pass rush move in less than 2 seconds and get to Caleb Williams and bring him down as a very elusive, play-extending type of quarterback? Or is Jeffrey Simmons going to just throw Tevin Jenkins out of the way and get to the quarterback in that time frame before Caleb Williams can escape the pocket or get rid of the ball? I think we're going to see the Titans bring guys from all over the field to sort of supplement the lack of like pass rush one-on-one ability from a lot of the guys on the D-line.
I think so too. And it's a good opportunity to do it. In week 1, there's nothing on tape. You've got a rookie quarterback making his NFL debut. Why not try to throw some chaos at him and see if you can, throw him off of his game? And then certainly, I'm excited to see what Denard Wilson's MO is. I feel like this is one area we've got a good feel for because we fully expect him to be aggressive, right? And sort of supplement it. And look, they brought in the corners for a reason. They brought them in, I think, well, first of all, of course, to combat, pass happy attacks all over the NFL, but also I think to cover for that extra second and give this pass rush time. And you are hoping that helps make the traditional pass rushing looks better than we think they're going to be because of the lack of high-end depth, especially at edge. And then you've got an unknown in Tavondre Sweat. But I also think giving them that extra second, if they're covering for that extra second, then the quarterback has a hard time to get the ball out of his hands, even when it is a blitz, right? Even when you are throwing a little chaos at him. So Denard Wilson's ability to supplement the pass rush or lack thereof is going to be a big question all season long. And it's definitely something I'm excited to watch, especially against a rookie quarterback in week 1.
Yeah, same. And one of the guys I'm excited to watch try to get pressure is Tavondre Sweat. Tavondre Sweat played against Caleb Williams in 2021, Texas OU. Texas took a 28-7 lead in the first half. Spencer Rattler was benched. Caleb Williams comes in. Now, Tavondre Sweat was not a starter this year. He, in fact, did not record a stat in this game, but he did play in the game against Caleb Williams.
And a front row seat to it, too.
And Caleb Williams led OU to a comeback. They were down 28-7. They won 55-48. Pretty much on the back of Caleb Williams, running and throwing. So he's seen him up close and personal. He knows what that'll be like. He's maybe the only guy on the Titans defense. I didn't look. Michigan didn't play USC in the last 2 years, I don't think. So Jalen Harrell didn't play him. I'm pretty surprised if Jarvis Brown, if Louisville played USC. I don't remember that matchup happening in the last couple of years. So definitely going to be interesting to see the defensive line. All right, any other matchups you want to talk about, or should we move to our new segment, Justin?
I'm just going to quickly hit the D-line. I think the Titans have a chance to have some advantageous matchups here. I think the Bears are pretty decent at tackle, but a lot of questions on the interior. Nate Davis, a familiar name at right guard, has been a full-blown train wreck, to be honest with you, in Chicago. Availability has been an issue. There's been some questions about motivation and work ethic. They've got a new center in Coleman Shelton, who is not a long-term solution. He's a sort of below average, slightly above, average level starter that was released by the Rams earlier this summer. And then the left guard, Tevin Jenkins, probably their best player, but I don't know that he's a high-end, high-level starter. So I think some advantageous matchups for Jeffrey Simmons and Tavondre Sweat going into this one.
Yeah, I agree. I'm definitely excited to see that too. So I'm glad you took the time to shout that out before we move on to our new segment, Justin. I'll drink to that. Presented by Sinkers Beverages in East Nashville. So Justin, how this segment's going to work here is it's called I'll Drink to That. Now on a post-game show, it's going to be things that we liked from the game. We'll get to that when we get to Sunday's recap. But for the pregame, sort of what we hope to see in this game, what we're excited to see in this game, or something that we would drink to. So I'll raise my glass here and say I'll drink to Will Levis' 2024 debut under Brian Callahan. Super excited to see him. I think we are in for a big season. I think there is going to be a bit of a slow start, as I talked about a little bit before. Like, I don't think he's coming out week 1 and throwing for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. But I do think it could be one of those efficient, game manager type of games where he completes 65% of his passes for like 225, maybe a touchdown, maybe two. I could see him throw an interception against this very stingy secondary as he still gets his bearings about him. But I think we're going to come out of this game saying that's the franchise quarterback we hoped to see. There's still room for him to keep getting better, especially from just like a statistical standpoint. But I think that we're in for a treat here to watch Will Levis operate this offense, and I'm just excited to see it. So I'll drink to that.
I hope you're right, and I hope that's what I'm drinking to as well, and not drowning my misery instead after Sunday's game. All eyes are on Will Levis. Okay, we've talked about it, but I think we're bringing on the guest. But I'll summarize with, we know what the negative context was last year: receivers who couldn't get open, O-line that couldn't pass protect, yada yada. Titans have done their best job to remove as much of that negative context as possible. It's on him. Brian Callahan took this job partially because he believes in his ability to mold Will Levis into a franchise quarterback. They've certainly given him the tools, the weapons at his disposal. The playbook is going to be favorable. Let's see what he does with it, and let's see how that starts in week one. I'll drink to a successful Will Levis season as a sophomore guy, proving he's a franchise quarterback.
Absolutely. Anything else, Justin? You throwing one out there, or is it we're sticking to Will Levis for this one?
It's all about Will Levis. We haven't talked about him enough, I think, considering this is a week one preview. So I'm sticking with Will Levis, the most important Titan heading into Sunday.
Would you take over or under on 220 pass yards? What would you bet?
I think I'd take the slight over. I think 220 is low enough that I feel good about that. It's, if you said 240, 245, I'm probably going under, though.
Interesting. So his actual passing yards line, if you look at the sports books right now, is 214.5. So you're saying you better take that, right? He's going for 220.
I'm taking the over. Screw it. It's week one. Hope is eternal, right? Hope springs eternal. Let's take the over on the Will Levis passing yards.
I'm almost more interested in what his completion percentage is going to be than I am the passing yards, because I think it's going to be a lot higher than we expect. Now, we know he led the preseason of passers with more than 10 attempts. He led the preseason in completion percentage like 84.6% or something insanely high for a guy who was sub 60 last year. But I'm just hoping that he takes a big step forward in this category, because what he did last season, I mean, with the ADOT, it's like we can't necessarily ding him for that, but 58.4% is just not quite NFL successful. And even if you are getting big plays out of that, that's too many drives that stall because of an incomplete pass that sets you up in a 3rd and long or an incomplete pass on 3rd and long. So I'm hoping to see like a 65% completion percentage in this game. And I do think that checkdowns to the running backs are going to be a major part of why his completion percentage is high. And then protect the ball. The Titans win this game if Will Levis has 0 turnovers. That's my prediction. If Will Levis has 1 or more turnovers, it becomes a toss-up. If he has 2 or more turnovers, the Titans lose this game. That's sort of what I'm putting this. I think it comes down, bottom line, to that.
I think that's a good point. Again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but a lot of this has to do with, what Brian Callahan's trying to turn Will Levis into. And that's a guy with a higher completion percentage because he's reading quickly and taking what the defense gives him and hitting his check down. So, and yeah, of course, you're on the road, especially important to protect the ball on the road. Again, loud atmosphere, all that. You start turning this ball over, that crowd's going to be fired up. And so is Caleb Williams. So yeah, you've got to sustain drives and you got to protect the football.
And you got to limit penalties, too, on the road because, you got a brand new offensive line, doesn't have necessarily the chemistry that they're going to have by the end of the season. Rookie left tackle. Don't false start. Don't grab, guys. Don't hold. Let's have a clean game as much as possible. All right, that was I'll Drink to That, presented by Sinkers Beverages, the premier wine, spirits, and beer store in East Nashville, serving the community since 1985. Their knowledgeable staff is proud to help you, finding something unique for any occasion, from birthday parties to milestone celebrations to everyday moments. Sinkers can help. And you can join the in crowd if you head to the sinkersbeverages.com website or check the link in this podcast description. In-crowd members get access to allocated wines and spirits, exclusive events, early access to barrel releases, and more. So thanks to Sinkers Beverages, I'll drink to that. All right, Justin, let's get to our guest. Jacob Infante here had some really great insight on what to expect from this Bears team from the other side. A lot more knowledgeable than I think you and I are about specifics about the Chicago Bears. So let's get to that now. All right, let's now welcome in our guest. He is a featured contributor for the Windy City Gridiron, the SB Nation Bears site, Jacob Infante. Thanks for joining us, Jacob. How's it going today?
It's good. Appreciate you guys for having me. I mean, as I'm sure you are, I'm just stoked for football to be here. So I'm kind of riding that high all week here. So I can't wait for this weekend. But just Thursday, Friday in general, I'm stoked to have football going on all week.
Yeah, same. I'm sure Bears fans everywhere are riding an incredible high after drafting Caleb Williams first overall, getting to be featured on Hard Knocks this summer was probably pretty cool, or this preseason training camp, and then Bears one of 5 teams, as are the Titans, to go undefeated in the preseason. So one of these two teams will get their first taste of defeat this coming weekend here. But I want to start with Caleb Williams. It's the obvious story, but it's the one that's going to get the most headlines. So can you just talk to us about what the vibe is around the team now, the hype that has been generated in the city and the excitement that Caleb Williams brings, whether he comes out of the gate hot or struggles a little bit? I don't think it's going to affect the vibe. So what have you seen from Caleb Williams throughout training camp and just the general mood around the Bears?
Yeah, so I think Bears fans are very excited, first and foremost, for Caleb Williams to be the quarterback. I think, we're looking at training camp and, the spurts you saw in the preseason, the expectations are high. And I think part of that comes down to the, obviously the supporting cast that you have with, one of the best, if not the best wide receiver trio on paper in the NFL. But also with, what should be a strong running game with the defense that should be able to support. But there are pretty high expectations for Caleb because of the supporting cast and also just because of what he showed at USC. There was a lot of turmoil in, the Bears Twitter, whatever space this offseason with, should the Bears keep Fields? Should they select Caleb? What should they do at quarterback? But I feel like a lot of people, they've jumped on the Caleb bandwagon if they weren't already. And, it's nice to see the city embracing him as their quarterback. I feel like it's a little bit different from your typical number one pick at quarterback, just because the Bears didn't have the worst team in the NFL in order to get that number one pick, and arguably no number one pick at quarterback in at least my lifetime has had such a strong supporting cast right out of the gate as Caleb is going to have, at least in theory. So the expectations admittedly a little bit higher than your average rookie quarterback, but still things are pretty exciting in Chicago, and I think there's plenty of reason to be stoked for the future.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think this is a great week 1 matchup for two teams that are going to be featuring brand new schemes or personnel on offense. Both teams, I mean, obviously the Titans went through an entire coaching staff overhaul. The Bears have new coordinators on both sides of the ball, although Matt Eberflus is calling the plays on defense, so expected continuity there. But when I look at the offense, with Shane Waldron coming in, he did a nice job in Seattle, but there were also some criticisms at times of him not getting the most out of his very talented playmakers with DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Kenneth Walker over there in Seattle, and comes into a situation where the Bears add Keenan Allen this offseason. They draft my favorite receiver in the draft, Rome Odunze. I mean, Marvin Harrison is Marvin Harrison, but I really liked Rome Odunze. And obviously DJ Moore still there. One of maybe the most underrated receiver in the league. Definitely up there with, extremely talented guy who doesn't always get the same recognition as some of the top names in the sport. Cole Kmet's still there. You bring in Gerald Everett. How are all these pieces? What does Shane Waldron need to get from this offense to get the most out of all these pieces, maybe in a way that he wasn't able to do in Seattle?
Yeah, and I think that looking at what the Bears have in terms of their offensive weapons, it is a bit different. I'd say it's more well-rounded than what you have in Seattle. And, even saying that, I'm a fan of what the Seahawks have as their wide receiver trio as well, with Metcalf, Lockett, and Smith and Jigba. There's certainly a lot to like there, but I think that when you factor in the tight end room with Cole Kmet being statistically a top 10 tight end over the last 2 years, Gerald Everett, who's been, a solid enough starter, and now he's going to be the tight end to essentially the more athletic move complementary tight end to Kmet being the, more traditional inline type of guy. And you have DeAndre Swift out of the backfield. You can give the ball to Khalil Herbert, who's a solid back. Roshan Johnson still has potential out of the backfield. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Bears fully utilize those offensive touches because I'm worried that there's not going to be enough to go around. Uh, you're looking at Komet, especially might see a little bit of a drop in production. Maybe Swift might not run for 1,000 yards or something like you saw with him with the Eagles last year, but it's still a really talented group. It's just going to be a matter of exactly how much usage they get because you have a diverse group of skill sets. Keenan being the shifty, savvy slot receiver, DJ Moore being the stud after the catch, Roma Dunze, not just being a 50-50 ball guy, but he's that bigger body, more physical player at the wide receiver position. And then Komet and Everett have different skill sets. It's a very diverse group. So I guess it's a good problem to have, too many cooks in the kitchen, but it's just got to figure out exactly how do you figure out the right mesh of all these styles? How do you, mesh all these different types of talents together? So I guess usage is the one thing that I'm going to be interested in seeing how Chicago fares with their offense this year.
Jacob, I just want you to know when you said Roshan Johnson, Graver fought the temptation to say hook 'em and throw up his horns. If it was me that had said it, he would have interrupted me and said hook 'em. But because you're the guest, it's being a bit more polite to you. Switching focus to the defensive side of the ball, Jacob. One thing that really grabbed me last year, final 8 games of the year, you'll know this, first in the league in scoring defense. I don't know if that's a coincidence, but it came after the trade for Montez Sweat. So there's definitely something there. This defense got significantly better down the stretch. I believe Eberflus took over the deep right calling plays midway through the season. Correct me if I'm wrong, after they had their weird situation with the DC there. But, first place, as I said, they've got a new DC this year. Guy comes over from Buffalo. I believe it was the linebackers position coach down there in Buffalo, who will know the linebacker really well, right? In Tremaine Edmonds. So interesting bit of reunion there. A guy that probably has to play better this year than he did last year. But just talk to me a little about this defense. What was the result of that? Because I know this personnel pretty well. I think there's still some questions opposite Montez Sweat, the other edge spot. Interior, D tackle's a question. They're relying on a step forward from Dexter. Talk to me a little about what you think led to that turnaround and if you see that carrying over this year.
Yeah, so like you said, I think the Montez Sweat addition was huge for Chicago. That defensive line, still a little bit of a concern, but having Montez Sweat, like a Pro Bowl talent at the edge rusher position, someone who, got double-digit sacks last year between his time with Washington and Chicago, that's a very valuable piece to have, and you give up a second-round pick for that all day long. So, you've got that in the fold now. They've got some young guys on the defensive line. I think there's definitely room to be excited for the future. I think, Dexter showed some promise in his rookie year. Austin Booker looked really good in the preseason, might play a little bit of a bigger role than some people were expecting. They did trade for Darrell Taylor from the Seahawks, as a rotational sort of guy. So I think the defensive line is going to have to prove a lot, and it's relying on, if the Bears are going to keep up that pace they had in the second half of the year, it's relying on young guys who are, relatively unproven to take that leap and solidify themselves as long-term building blocks for the defense. I think part of it came down to, facing relatively weak quarterbacks down the stretch, but, that's not to take away with what we saw. The play calling was so much better with Eberflus than it was with Alan Williams in 2022 and to start off 2023. And the secondary looked very good too. So you've got, 2 young corners in Tyreek Stevenson and Kyler Gordon still on their rookie contracts. They're developing. Jalen Johnson coming off an all-pro year. I think the secondary is the strength of Chicago's defense with, Jaquan Brisker being a solid starter. Kevin Byard, I should, while I have you guys here, is it Byard? How do I pronounce Byard? Okay. I feel like I should have looked into that way before I did, but I caught myself saying, and I'm like, is it Byard? What is it? But in theory, he should be an upgrade over Eddie Jackson, who, missed time due to injury and didn't play all that well in the starting lineup. So, I'm excited about the Bears defense this year. The linebackers, TJ Edwards looked really good. I have faith. Tremaine Edmonds, like you said, the familiarity with defensive coordinator Eric Washington. There's talent there. on this defense. It's just going to be a matter of, can the young guys step up? I don't think it's going to be an elite group, just because I think they're like, maybe one more impact starter on the defensive line away from reaching that point. But, even if their young guys can develop, then I have a feeling this could be a top 10 defense in the league. It's just going to be a matter of how the young guys develop this year.
One of the most fascinating things to me going into this matchup, I don't know how well you know the Titans personnel or if you realize this, and maybe I'm grasping at straws, but one of the most fascinating things to me, first of all, two GMs here, former players, right? Former players turned GM. And I feel like both of them have built their rosters in similar manners this offseason. Now, Ryan Poles has been on the job longer than Callahan has, so it's a bit maybe more of a complete picture, or the vision is. But when I look at these rosters, Titans fans are going to object to what you said earlier, and I don't blame them. I don't blame you, and I don't blame them. Everyone's got their own fandom, but you said the best receiving trio in the NFL. Titans are going to say, well, what about DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, and Tyler Boyd? What I take away from that is similar philosophies, right? Titans went out and got two receivers to add to DeAndre Hopkins. Bears did the same thing to add to DJ Moore. Poles have been building that corner spot for a while. They're three deep with Jalen Johnson, Tyreek Stevenson, Kyler Gordon. Titans will counter that with L'Jarius Sneed, Chidobe Awuzie, and Roger McCreary. They love their trio at corner as well. Kevin Byard added to the safety room with Jaquan Brisker. Titans went out, added Quandre Diggs and Jamal Adams to Amani Hooker. Like, these rosters are built very more similarly than I think these fan bases realize. There are differences. Titans have a better D tackle in Jeffrey Simmons, of course, than anything Chicago has. And the Bears got a better edge rusher probably in Montez Sweat than anything the Titans have. And I like Harold Landry, but I think Montez Sweat's on a bit of a different tier. But so some similarities. Does that strike you as maybe this could be a really interesting chess matchup this weekend?
I think it's going to be an interesting one. And I think that, admittedly, Bears fans are kind of underrating the Titans. I think, at least part of the fan base thinks, oh, it's going to be a win week one. I don't think it's necessarily a guarantee, because I am a fan of what the Titans have done, this offseason, and, with the new regime, slowly but surely putting their stamp on this roster. I think the secondary in Tennessee is really good. I'm a fan of the weapons they have as well. I think the backfield, Tony Pollard, Tyjae Spears, is going to be interesting. To me, I think it's going to come down to the trenches between both teams. I like what the Titans have done on their offensive line. I mean, you inherited some a questionable unit, all things considered, when Carlin started up,
to put it nicely.
Yeah. And then, but you're adding JC Latham, you're adding Peter Skoronski, adding Lloyd Cushenberry. That's a really, good foundation there. And I don't think that offensive line is entirely set. I feel like maybe an upgrade or two still could be in the works down the stretch, but it's certainly progress. And having Jeffrey Simmons up front, T'Vondre Sweat is someone I think could be a good nose tackle in the league. And Harold Landry, like you said, is a solid edge rusher. So I think it's going to come down to the trenches. Can Chicago's defense, even with a young Titans offensive line, can Chicago put pressure on Will Levis? What is Will Levis going to be in year two? That being a big question with Tennessee. And then is Chicago's offensive line going to be able to stop Jeffrey Simmons? And even if they do, what's T'Vondre Sweat going to do right out of the gate? Can, Sebastian Joseph Day or, Harold Landry, whoever, can they put pressure on Caleb Williams, make him, force him to go outside of the pocket a little bit? So that's where I think is going to decide this game, because, both teams have good receivers. Both teams have good secondaries. I've been on the Amani Hooker train since his days at Iowa, so I'm excited. I'm happy to see him thriving in Tennessee. But it's going to be interesting for sure to see how the skill positions fare. But I really think the trenches is where this game's going to be won or lost for either team.
I think that makes sense, especially when you compare the strengths of the rosters. Jacob, we really appreciate your time here. We're going to close this out with one last question. This is a tradition on Music City Audible. We've done this going back years now, Justin. We always close with similar question here. I'm going to ask you to predict the game flow, what you expect to see, how this game will unfold. And then if you want to give a score prediction at the end, no obligation, but we will take it. And I know it's week one. It's always hard to predict what any team's going to look like in week one. And week ones are often bizarre on their own, aside from the fact that we don't know anything. Like sometimes it means nothing for the rest of the season what teams look like in week one. But particularly with these two teams, with a rookie quarterback taking over in Chicago and a new offensive coordinator with an entirely new staff and a bunch of new players, personnel in Tennessee, I can understand if you were hesitant to predict anything here because it's going to be very much a wait and see. But what are your initial thoughts if you had to put something down?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the relative inexperience of these quarterbacks, I think it could show early. Honestly, I mean, and it's week one. No offense is going to look perfect right out of the gate. There are going to be some, mistakes, a little bit of rust here and there. I can see Tennessee getting out to an early lead. And maybe a little bit of unrest, but I do think the Bears will enter the halftime. It'll be close, regardless of who leads. I think Chicago is going to stack up some momentum heading into the second half. Maybe a touchdown or like a nice 2-minute drive led by Caleb Williams. And even if they're not winning at halftime, be like, all right, this is a game. The Bears are building up some momentum. I think it's going to be a close one, honestly. I think that, both teams are set up and they're not at that. I don't think they're at that point where it's like, all right, deep playoff run, here we come. But some of the pieces are being built. They're, a couple pieces away still from reaching that point, but the progress is definitely there. So I do have the Bears winning. I think part of it, being at home at Soldier Field is, the home field advantage certainly helps. And I'm not much of a betting guy. I want to say, isn't the lines like, I think Bears -4.5 or something like that. I want to say that's what it is. I think it'll be a win, but less than that. I have like a 3 or 4 point win for the Bears. I think it'll be close. Tennessee's certainly going to give them some fits, especially up front. I mean, you've got a stud like Jeffrey Simmons. That's going to be pretty tough for a Bears interior that's been a little shaky over the last couple of years. Tevin Jenkins is a very good player, but, centers still don't have your long-term piece. Right guard, Nate Davis coming off a down year. You guys know him well. He's solid in Tennessee, but, had a down year in his first year in Chicago and, availability issues. You don't know what you're getting at right guard.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's, yeah, we're living the experience over here, so we're loving that. But no, I think it'll be a good game. I think if Tennessee could get out to, maybe a little bit more of a stronger start right out of the gate, but I think Chicago will pick it up. Maybe there's bias on my end picking the Bears to win, but I do think it'll be a close game. And honestly, I think it's going to be a good way to kick off the year. I think it'll be competitive, and that's all you can ask for, just good competitive football.
Yeah, I totally agree. You are right. Bears are -4 in Vegas right now, so they are definitely Vegas expecting Caleb Williams era to get off to a good start. Jacob, we really appreciate your time. Wish you the best of luck this year, and enjoy watching Caleb Williams, man.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I appreciate it. I'm excited to follow the Titans this year too. There's a lot of fun pieces on that roster. So no matter what happens week one, should be a good year for both of us, I hope.
Yeah, totally agree. All right. Thanks, Jacob.
Appreciate you guys.
All right. Thanks again to Jacob. Justin, it's prediction time, baby. What you got? Week one. We're going to track them this year. We're going to track our predictions, and whoever is right more often wins. I don't know. Let us know in the comments. What should the winner win? Justin, what do you got?
Oh, man. I don't want to pick a loss. It's week one. I'm trying to maintain the excitement, but I don't know. Like, I think I lean towards the home team, and I lean towards the more experienced coaching staff. I'm sorry. I hope you continue listening to this podcast. I know Graver's like nodding his head in disappointment. I just think it's so hard to get your team ready for week one. I almost, just want to lean towards the guy that's done it before in Matt Eberflus, and at home, the excitement of Williams. That everyone just can't wait to see a Caleb Williams highlight. I hope we crush that like we crushed the Jameis Winston a couple of years ago. Granted, we had our own rookie quarterback, but, obviously there was more excitement for Winston being number one overall. I think I'm going like Bears 24, Titans 21. Like, I think it's going to be a close game. I'm sorry. I hate to do it. I hate it. I just don't know that I could start off optimistic. I need good reason. I need visual proof. My girlfriend tells me, I was about to say her name, tells me all the time You're so negative. You're so pessimistic when it comes to Titans. I say, I've been conditioned to lose almost my whole life, okay? I need some proof before I can shake that bad habit. I'm so excited about this team. I'm so excited about Levis and this coaching staff. If they were at home, I'd be going Titans. I'm leaning towards the home team. I hope I look like an idiot on the recap show.
You will. Me too. You will. I wrote it down. JM prediction, Chicago 24, Tennessee 21. So we'll revisit this on Sunday. But, Justin, I have a trivia question for you before I get to my prediction. Do you know the last rookie quarterback to win a week 1 start?
I do. Yeah, because I read Easton Freeze's article just like you did. Was it Carr in 2002?
No. The
Vic?
2002, bitch. Marcus Mariota was a rookie who won a week 1 start.
Oh, sorry. What am I confusing then? He had something in there about Vic and number 1 overall, you said.
Number one overall pick. No. Rookie quarterback.
Oh, sorry.
To win a week 1 start.
Oh, I don't know.
Sam Darnold in 2018. The rookie quarterbacks are 0-7-1 in week 1 over the past 5 seasons. That does not bode well for Caleb Williams as a rookie. Now, maybe he was a generational talent. Maybe he breaks the streak. But I think it's his first game ever in the NFL. That's not a preseason game. Titans, there's absolutely no film on what to expect from the Titans on either side of the ball. Is there anything to expect from the Bears? Not really from the offense. From the defense, I think there is. I think you can take the last 8 weeks of last season and see what the Bears want to do and come up with a way to attack them. Brian Callahan's talked about it in the press conference on Wednesday about how game planning is like his favorite thing, and he loves that he is back in game planning mode. He said, I'm glad I can focus on this instead of having to do some other things I have to do, like stand up here talking to you guys, as he said to the press. So he's all in on game planning mode. I think there is game planning you can do from an offensive standpoint about weaknesses or areas you want to attack the Bears defense. I don't think the Bears are going to be able to say, here's how we know we can attack the Titans defense. Now at halftime, sure, they're going to sit around and be like, okay, here's what they're doing. Here's how we can adjust. And the Titans are going to do the same thing. But I think from the jump, I think the Titans have a tiny advantage there in terms of the film study side of things, just because Eberflus has called the plays for the Bears defense and is going to continue to do so. So I think the Titans get off to a nice start. I'm echoing a little bit of what Jacob just said as we closed out with his little segment, that the Titans do get off to a fast start. I think the Titans I think they could go up like 14-0 in this game, and all Titans fans everywhere are going to be like, wow, this is the team we've been waiting for, and people on Twitter are going to be like, can you believe it? And then by the third quarter, it's going to be like 17-14 Titans. And you'll be like, okay, what happened to that 2-touchdown lead? It evaporated. I'm going to go final score 20-14 in favor of Tennessee. I think they get in the end zone twice. I think they boot through a couple field goals. Caleb Williams scores a couple times, but also there's like a 4th down conversion to potentially extend a game-winning drive that falls short. Titans win 20-14. That's my prediction. Roast me if you must. Let us know your prediction in the comments below. Justin, we previewed week 1. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
Yeah, because I'm a football nerd. I can't help myself. One other interesting storyline I want to monitor. I hope Brian Callahan's involved in defensive game planning a little bit, because that offensive coordinator on the Bears side, Shane Waldron, he should know him pretty well, right? Like Waldron's a McVay disciple. So he runs that Shanahan, McVay, and, zone offense to a degree. Callahan obviously knows it really, really well. Now, that's also true of the opposite. What's not to say Waldron's going into Chicago and saying, hey, Callahan runs this zone offense. I know it well, and he's helping Eberflus out. But I think Callahan's going to be a bit more unpredictable than Waldron is.
Callahan's going to be pulling from his Peyton Manning days, his Matthew Stafford days, and his, Zach Taylor days. Also, funny note on Zach Taylor, while we're not on topic at all. Zach Taylor was asked about the unofficial depth chart, and he said something like, oh, yeah, I put zero thought into the unofficial depth chart. I don't even care. I don't even think about it. I spent no time making that. And Brian Callahan just coached under Zach Taylor for 5 years, probably saw him spend 0 minutes focusing on the unofficial depth chart. And I'm sure Brian Callahan has a very similar approach to the unofficial depth chart. So can we please, as fans of the Titans, stop caring about the unofficial depth chart, because it means absolutely nothing. Anyway, sorry for that brief aside. yeah, that's it. We're done, right? Thanks again to everyone for listening. Thanks even more if you're watching us on YouTube. We hope you stick with us for the whole season. If you're just joining us for 2024, welcome aboard. If you've been a longtime listener, we appreciate you more than you know. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, the Music City Audible. Give this video a thumbs up, like, turn on channel alerts so you get a notification every time we drop a new video. And again, comment anything below. Boost that algo. We appreciate you guys so much. Thanks also to Sinkers Beverages for presenting this episode, sponsoring our new segment, I'll Drink to That. Check out the Sinkers Beverages website or check the link in this podcast description. Again, to join the In Crowd. In Crowd members get access to allocated wines and spirits, exclusive events, early access to barrel releases, and more. Plus, they're on Uber Eats. So if you need some booze for game day Sunday, it's a road game. You're not going to the game, I assume. Don't go watch it at a bar. Just Uber Eats a bunch of alcohol to your house and watch it from your account from the comfort of your own home. All right, that's all I got. Thanks to everyone. We'll be back on Sunday, basically right after the game, to recap this hopefully Titans win. If it's a Titans loss, we will still have things to drink to, and we might introduce another new segment that I'm going to call Silver Linings, but that's only going to happen if the Titans lose. All right, everyone, until then, y'all stay safe out there. Go Titans and tighten up. Does that work? I don't care. Tighten up. Bye.
A Broadway sports media production.